I'm interested in your views on what's happening in Australia. You wrote recently about Sweden, their left-wing government having mass migration and having all sorts of unintended consequences, going from this peaceful paradise to a country now. I think Sweden's the second most bombed country that is not at war. They've got bombs going off all over the place. And we've got a left-wing government in now. We've just had more than 500,000 net migrants come in a year. It's an incredible surge to previous years. What do we need to be mindful of, and what lessons are there from Sweden, which really had an open border policy different to what we've seen in Australia?
Yes, no, it's amazing, Rita. I mean, as you say, this is... in 2015, the Swedes opened their borders. They said it's incredibly important to be open-hearted and generous to the world and so on. But what they did was, as we just heard in the previous segment, they did what a lot of governments have been doing. You effectively punish people who come to our countries legally. You punish them and you incentivize people who break the rules and come illegally. And that's happening everywhere from Sweden to America to Britain and Australia. It's an astonishing mistake. But yes, I mean, as Rita says, you know, you have this crazy situation. Like Sweden, you know, do you remember the old days? We all used to talk about Sweden, always a Scandinavian option for everything. Anything in life could be improved by referring to Scandinavia. People would say, oh, well, the Swedish this, the Danish that, whether it was a hot drink or a way to feel good or a policy. It was always about Scandinavia. And then, as you say, Rita, you know, you get this situation where you have now Sweden, the second largest number of bombings of any country not officially at war, only after Mexico. Only after Mexico. And if I'd have said to you 10 years ago, you know, what do you think about when you think about Sweden? Like me, you'd have probably said, well, you know, I don't know, hot drinks, overpriced food, but you know, nice people, rather cold. You wouldn't have said, oh, grenade attacks. You know, the traditional Swedish grenade attack. Never forget the intrinsic importance to our culture of grenades. And but that's the case because they just didn't care about who they let in, and it meant that they were letting in military-aged males who very often lied about their age. And, you know, none of this, you know, there are legitimate asylum seekers in the world. Those people are completely stripped of their capabilities and their rights. When you allow, as I've seen this in Sweden myself, you know, big bearded guys in their 20s who say, oh, I'm a child migrant, you know, allowed into a school and so on, and they just lose control of everything. But, you know, that's the thing with the migration issue. All of our countries in the developed world are struggling with this. There are millions upon millions of people in the world who want to come to relatively safe, liberal, democratic countries like this one, like Britain, like America, like European countries. And the question is, are we able to step up to that challenge and actually bring in people at a reasonable rate, or is that too difficult for our politicians?
Great question. James.
Well, Douglas, I want to pick up on that theme here because it seems like a whole big part of the problem here is that in the West, in countries, whether it's Sweden or Scandinavia or England or America or Australia, there's a real problem now, you know, about talking about the values that we have as either individual nations or as, you know, a broader society. And it's like we've lost any sort of ability. We're now squeamish about talking about that. In Australia, you can only talk about the immigration issue in the context of housing and the economy. If you get out of that zone, you know, it starts to be a third rail. Have we lost the ability? Is it too late for us now to get that back? Because it seems to me where this all goes, Douglas, is that you wind up being so liberal, so tolerant that you import an awful lot of people who don't necessarily come because they want to subscribe to these values, but maybe impose a different set of values. What happens then to the West? Is it too late? How do we get back this solid ground, which I think is ground that's not racist, but it is something that is to be proud of and to be cherished, because once we lose it, we don't get a liberal society back.
Well, that's right. I mean, we know, James, don't we? We know the values of this. We know the reason why people come to our countries. There is no movement the other way. I mean, I always say, when the boats were coming to Australia with illegals from other parts of this region, It wasn't like they met boats the other way of Aussies desperately trying to flee the oppressive, conservative or otherwise government in Australia. The movement is always one way. I mean, you don't even get people moving from Britain to France. On the boats. It's always France to Britain. People want to move up through Europe. When people cross the Rio Grande, when these Mexican cartels and others take very, very beleaguered people who've given their life savings to horrible, horrible criminal gangs, you don't find a bunch of Texans saying they want to flee to the freedom of Ecuador. Now, my point on that is, therefore, we should have the courage to say, look, at the very least, we must be doing something right. There must be something we're doing right.
It's our pronouns, the use of our pronouns. That
I know. Yes. It's all of that for sure. I forgot I didn't check your pronouns beforehand, James, but I let me guess them. But it's a very strange thing, and as you said it before, we've got this situation where you can talk about it in economic terms, you can talk about it in housing terms, but the larger cultural terms are still a third rail. And I'm astonished that after all of these years, we've known the issues of immigration and integration for many years. I'm amazed that we're still in all of our countries at this very, very toddler stage of the debate. It shouldn't be that hard to say, look, if you want to come to Australia, you want to become part of Australia, you've got something to give to this country, and you will give to this country, and you want to be part of it, fantastic. Join the queue and let's see what we can do. But if it's the case that you want to come here and you don't really like the place, or you want to change the place, or you want to change the place back to the sort of place where the place you left from, and maybe some of the reasons why you left, then maybe that's not going to be a workable deal.